Hello everyone, and welcome to my Darkrai VSTAR deck profile. Now before I get into it, I just want to say that this is not a competitive deck at all. If you're trying to win regionals, nationals, go with something else. This will lose to Arceus, Palkia, and Mew fairly frequently. But if you're looking for a fun deck that has great energy acceleration, good damage potential, I think you'll like this deck a lot. So with that out of the way, let's get into talking about Darkrai V. I'm running 4 copies of it. Some people like to run 3 copies, but I think 4 copies really helps with the consistency because you want this card on turn 1. You want to be able to evolve into the V-Star on turn 2 and start pumping out a ton of damage. So because of that, I really think 4 copies is the way to go. There are some situations where you may want to get Galarian Moltres V instead of Darkrai, but I'll get into that whenever I get to that other card. And we have 3 copies of Darkrai V-Star. This is the main damage dealer of the deck. Sometimes with Dark Pulse, I can get to 240 damage on turn 2, which is great for knocking out an Arceus. It'll take a decent chunk of effort, a decent chunk of energy, but it can happen. It's also got this great ability, not as good as Arceus V-Star's ability, but this is still pretty good for recurring things like Dark Patch, Trekking Shoes, Cross Switcher, which I do have in the deck, but it's really good for bringing back item cards that can help you get more damage on the board. So we're running 3 copies again for consistency. We want to be able to evolve this as often as possible. But now that our main attacker is out of the way, let's get into support Pokemon. First we have Radiant Greninja. This deck can sometimes have problems with getting energy in the discard pile, which is the main way you can cheat extra energy by bringing it from the discard pile to your bench. But this will help us get energy there because it forces you to discard an energy in order to draw 2 cards. So it's a win-win for us. We get energy in the discard pile, which helps us cheat it out later, and it also lets us draw 2 cards, which can draw us into more plays, extenders, maybe we draw a Professor's Research, that kind of thing. And next we have Galarian Moltres V. Sometimes we use it for its attack, which is what I was going to tell y'all about. It will do 190, which is 220 with a Choice Belt. So maybe if you're going second, if you get like the perfect combination of cards, you can get 3 energy on him plus a Choice Belt, and that can knock out pretty much any V in the game. Any of the relevant Vs, that is. Arceus V, Mew V, Palkia V, anything, if they live in the active spot on their first turn. If you get lucky, you can knock it out. But primarily we're using it for its ability, Dire Flame Wings. It can grab an energy from the discard pile and attach it to itself, which is a nice little way to cheat extra damage out. Some people like to run 2 copies. I like to run 1 just because of this last sentence. You can't use more than 1 Dire Flame Wings ability each turn, so even if you have 2 of these guys on the bench, you can only attach to 1 from the discard pile. So I think 1 copy of this card is better than 2. Next we have Baby Galarian Moltres. I'm running 2 because there's no once per turn, similar to the V version, and it's also a really nice way to cheat out extra damage. You can do, 60 extra damage with this, and if you get 2 of these on the field, that's 120 total, provided you get the right combination of cards. Let's say you drop a Professor's Research, get a Ball Search, or this card plus 2 energy, 60 extra damage just like that. And I'm also running 2 just because it's really our only answer to Mew control. The V Union typically runs Miltank, and we don't have a bunch of answers to Miltank in this deck. There was one game I was playing where the Mewtwo player was really stalling pretty well, so I had to use the attack to do 30 damage to itself. The Mewtwo player wasn't taking any knockouts, so because he was leaving Miltank in the active spot, he was only doing 20 damage per attack, and I was able to use Moltres to knock himself out, which bumped up this guy's damage to 120. And this is also not only good for answering Miltank, but also doing a good chunk of damage later in the game. It can do 250 after your opponent's gotten 2 Vs knocked out, plus a Choice Belt. It'll do 250, that's pretty good. So yeah, good energy acceleration, good way to deal with Miltank, good overall. Next we have Pyukumuku. Because this is a turbo version of the deck, this is just for extra consistency. You could take it out. I've been thinking about a couple cards to take out to make it better. I'm wanting to add Lady, which is coming up with a new Lost Origin, Lost Abyss, I forget what this set's called. But you could take this card out. I'm thinking Lady is a good replacement for it, but basically this is for consistency. You can take it from your hand, put it on the bottom of your deck, and draw a card. It's great for cycling, seeing more options, and it can sometimes bail you out of a really tough situation. We also have the good old Lumineon Crobat combo. Crobat's good for drawing your cards, and Lumineon's good for searching out boss or professor's research. Just both of them good ways to extend plays and get more damage on the board. So that's it for Pokemon, so let's get into the trainers. First, I'd like to talk about the stadiums. So, Training Court, it's a good stadium for the deck, but I've run into issues where there's not enough energy in the discard pile to make use of it. So that's why I think PokéStop is better for the turbo version of this deck. It's good for a bunch of reasons. One being because we're an item-based deck, this lets you discard the top 3 cards of your deck and keep items. And like I said, because we're an item-based deck, we can keep a bunch of the cards that we might happen to discard. The only downside is when we discard a supporter or a Pokemon, so I'd kind of recommend using it later in the game when you've established a board, like you maybe have 2 Darkrai VSTARs on the bench, a Moltres, a Radiant Greninja. That way you're not going to be discarding cards you could potentially use. But on top of being able to be really efficient with our item usage, it also lets us discard energy, which, like I mentioned, we have an issue with getting into the discard pile. So because this lets us discard energy, we can typically get more damage on the field because of it. And last, next, that is, we have our ball search cards. So we've got 4 Quick Ball, 4 Ultra Ball. These are good for 2 reasons. Good in early game for searching out Pokemon we need, like a Darkrai VSTAR to do damage, that kind of thing. But it's also good because it lets you discard cards from your hand. This will discard 2, this will discard 1. And like I said, it gets energy into the discard pile, which we have an issue with. So it's good for that. We also have a Choice Belt. Now think of this as another energy attachment for turn, because it's a Pokemon tool card. It's an extra 30 damage, which is essentially the same thing as another energy attachment from your hand. So if you think of it like that, it can help you get to 240 quicker, it can help you get to 280 quicker, and it can even help you knock out VMAX Pokemon pretty easily. Now, similar to Pyukumuku, I'm thinking you might be able to cut Heavy Ball. It's really good for certain situations, like if you prize a Moltres V, or you want to get a Darkrai V out easily without discarding anything. Heavy Ball lets you do that. It's situationally useful though, sometimes you don't prize anything you need, so because of that, I'm thinking this would be a better card to take out than Pyukumuku for the Lady supporter, as I mentioned. But I'm keeping it in the deck for now just because when it is useful, it is very, very useful. Next we have 4 copies of Trekking Shoes. Similar to Pyukumuku, Trekking Shoes will just really help your consistency, but I think it's better than Pyukumuku because it lets you look at 2 cards instead of just the 1. And on top of that, if you don't want the top card of your deck, let's say top deck into an energy, you can discard it, give energy into your discard pile to cheat out later, and then get a card that is potentially useful. And of course, what would the deck be without 4 copies of Trekking Shoes? I mean, not Trekking Shoes, Dark Patch. You have all that energy in your discard pile, but what you gonna do with it? You know, you can only use Galarian Moltres' ability once per turn. Well, Dark Patch will help you out with that energy. All in all, this is 30, 60, 90, 120 extra damage, and if you bring it back with Darkrai VSTAR's ability, that's an extra 60 damage on top of the 120. So it just really helps your damage potential, really helps you get to those numbers you want to hit. Let's move on to Switch. So some people like to run Air Balloon, some people like to run a combination of Switch and Air Balloon. I just prefer Switch. You know, if you want to run Air Balloon, go for it. You've got plenty of time before the rotation. And on top of that, it's also an item card, similar to Air Balloon, so you're not really losing anything, but it does help you recur it with Darkrai VSTAR's ability along with PokéStop. But similar to Switch, as I mentioned earlier, we are running Cross Switcher. This is because of the PokéStop. I was running Boss, more copies of Boss, that is, before I put in the PokéStop, but since PokéStop's in here, I'm thinking Cross Switcher, being an item card, is a bit more useful, and it can really help you switch out Pokemon and grab Pokemon from your opponent's bench. It'll get you past the Yonsei. So it's different than Boss, but it's still just as useful. And speaking of Boss, I am running 1 copy. I was running 3 copies before the PokéStop, but I brought it down to 1 copy just because Boss is pretty useful. Maybe take it out because it doesn't synergize well with PokéStop, but I think I'd like to leave it in. And on to our other supporter cards, we are running 4 Professor's Research. Ignore the Juniper, basically the same thing. But basically, if you're not playing a boss, which is situationally useful, you want to be playing a research every turn for obvious reasons. It just helps you extend your plays, get extra damage, have options for next turn, answers for your opponent. It's just a great card. I'm not running Marnie, I'm not running Avery, I'm not running things like that, just because you want to be drawing as much as possible just to do as much damage as possible. And that's why I'm running 4 copies of Professor's Research. And last but not least, because we are an energy-based deck, I'm running 13 copies of Energy. Now, that does hurt our deck's consistency quite a bit. Most decks will run 8 to 10 copies of Energy, looking at Arceus, Palkia, that kind of thing. But because we need energy to do damage, we have to run a few more copies than I'd like to. But I'm thinking 13 is the sweet spot. Some people run 14, but I'm thinking that doesn't help out too much. It's kind of cutting space for techs I'd like to bring in, which is why I'm running 13 energy. But that's it for the deck profile. If you enjoyed it, I really hope it helped you out with ideas for your own deck, and I'd love to see you back in another video. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.